and I've been muted this whole time. So, anyway, I'm not. And I've been muted this whole time. I also make sure that I don't have a bunch of other things. Anyway, I'm not. Um, sorry. This is hilarious. Also make sure that I don't have a bunch of other things. Anyway. I think we're a bit better. Um, so I think. Um, so people can actually hear me while I'm trying to restream this. So is this working? I'm going to assume that it is. I'm also I'm also going to assume that the URL to YouTube channel, that's another thing. So that tells me to good. I'm just going to send out one little tweet to now if you can and all that's well, I just want to, start chatting a little bit about a few things. And the timing is actually pretty amazing because I just finished I just episode of Joe Rogan, but I found a pretty incredible. So, um, gosh, I have no idea. Um, let, so, be in a chat with you guys, even whether it was on Twitter or somewhere else, but how to do that. So, this is working, and that this is working well, and that folks on Twitter can hear me through the Twitter live stream, and that's why I'm not hearing any complaints. And let's see. Yeah, nope, I am not seeing any complaints. Bum. So I also set up a spaces. So just in case, if nothing is working, um, we've got a backup solution. Let's see if this actually does any good. I'm so sorry for keeping everybody waiting, but this is tricky, especially using Livestream for the first time. So I'm not really sure if this is working or not, and I'm going to hope that somebody would be kind enough to tell me on Twitter if it wasn't. So, you know, I I was just listening to Joe Rogan on what's it called? What's this guy's name? Majid Nawaz on Joe Rogan, and he closes out the he closes out the episode with. Now that's be hilarious. I'm just talking to myself here. I'm hoping that this means that you guys can hear me. Let's see. Sorry for anybody who's. I really don't know whether this is working or not, and so I'm a little bit. Um, I'm going to assume that it's working. Okay, so at the end of the episode, we hear him talk about how this has been, a slow, like the whole analogy of a slow boiling of frog, right? And that when you look at how totalitarian creep happens, and this is something that I've been talking about a lot for a long time now, things happen in increments, right? And because things happen in increments, it's these are things that you don't really notice as, say, slowly you're just told, 2 weeks businesses have to close, right? And then you're told you're just going to wear a mask whenever you're on the MTA, right? You're on mass transit. And then you're told that if you want to go, and I'm speaking of New York City, if you want to participate in the homecoming party for New York, outdoors, you have to show proof of vaccination. And these happen one step, another step, another step. And I found something really both troubling and insightful in thinking about this, because the thing that I'm most afraid of right now, because I have to fly back to New York the day after tomorrow, the thing that worries me more than anything is that, oh, great, thank you. Sir Brentley, you have finally told me that you could see me. All right, you guys are gonna have to hold up a second because I need to get a vape because that stressed the hell out of me. So 2 seconds while I grab it, and I will be back with you. So sorry this is so disorganized, but learning. So back at you. So here's the thing, right? I have to fly back tomorrow, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, to thanks, Bradley, to New York City. I am petrified but I'm also totally cool with it simultaneously. Why? Why both? Because honestly, I've spent a month somewhere where it's sane. Simply put, here is sane. I think that other places that also didn't have the mandates, and by the way, if anybody has anything they want to say or ask, let's just do it via Twitter, okay? Because I'll have to figure out other ways of doing this. I think it's also live streaming to my YouTube. I think. This is the kind of stuff that isn't my. I'm a poet, people. Like, you know, I shouldn't, I'm not that techie. Well, I used to be, but not anymore. You should see my setup in here. Actually, I'm pretty proud of what I did. um, I wish that I could really stress to everybody the difference of being somewhere that's sane and then New York City. I try to imagine ways to explain this because I think that that episode of Joe Rogan, it took me a long time to get through it all. The most recent one. He talks a lot about how he knows what totalitarianism is and how it operates. And he knows, that a lot of people will be skeptical. And I mean, I think we see it all the time. I mean, on Twitter, the number of times that I have to put up with somebody who insists that somehow making an analogy between what we're dealing with now and the atrocities of the past is fuck you. I'm sorry. I don't that and the reason that oh, my internet connection's a bit unstable. Hopefully this won't be a major problem. The reason that that offends me, I go back to New York and I'm a of a Hungarian immigrant at that time. So 19 and I've seen Hungarian Jews that basically said, well, no, this is New York isn't happening in Florida or Massachusetts. Our federalism has protected some of us, right? Well, the Hungarians felt very confident happening to Germans. What happened to Poles was going on to with Poles. In fact, or that refugees rather to Hungary, and they came taking one foot and another foot of babies and then ripping them. That gross. And the overall reaction people had was annoyance. They were annoyed to hear this. I mean, why talk about such things? It reminds me of something someone said to me yesterday. A person who's very intelligent, but they like to say, "Oh, stay positive. Be positive, think positive." Well, thinking positively and staying positive, is that going to help Canada? Is that going to help New York? Is that going to help our futures? Because the ways that these things are the same, and the ways that this slow boil analogy I think is so important, is that if we don't have something, I think, to stabilize us, like our principles, foundational principles, at one time in history, I'd say very easily it could have been, say, the Ten Commandments, religion, right? The fact that it's not enough right now is all we need to know, that it's not enough. Because what I find really troubling, whenever discussions come up about how to solve what's going on right now, most of them seem to come from a place that's not really urgent. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to use a really hyperbolic analogy. Let's say you're getting mugged. Or actually, I'm going to tell a story that something that happened to me. It's 2002 or 3, and I'm with my boyfriend, and he was a DJ, so we were feeling all romantic, and we decided we want to go to the roof of his building and look at the sunrise. And I had this weird feeling like I didn't want to go up there, that something was wrong. But, he's 6'4", tall, and, pushes the door open from behind me, and there, standing at the edge of the roof, is a guy in a ski mask. And what does he do? He says to the guy in the ski mask, "Excuse me, can we help you?" Which to me is pretty analogous to some things that some people have been doing, trying to reason with, for example, people who insist on masking children. And my reaction when my boyfriend says, "Excuse me, can we help you?" is I turn and I start saying, "Go, go, 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 go." I'm not going to try to reason with a person who is giving me every indication that their purpose and what they want and are interested in doing is potentially going to hurt my body, to put it simply, right? And this is pretty basic stuff. This is pretty instinctual. And I run out back into the stairwell. Turns out I can't lock the door behind me. To make a long story short, the guy grabs me, throws me down to the ground, and puts a gun in my head like this. And I'll never forget it. I remember how cold it was, and I remember really being annoyed that I knew nothing about pistols, because I couldn't tell if the safety was on or whatever. And gun was right on my head. We're in the stairwell of a building. My boyfriend is now like this good, he ran ahead of me. Yeah, I'm a total keeper, right? Guy pulled the necklace off my neck. Gun was on my head. And I start to slowly open my bag, and I'd luckily just been to the ATM, and start pulling cash out. And I'm looking the guy in the eye and handing it to him. And the guy indicates that it's Jesse's turn, and Jesse says, "Come on, man, you don't want to do that." And my reaction was, "Jesse, he already is." See, the gun was on my head. Now, a lot of the times when I hear people talk about either giving the benefit of the doubt, to what the motives are, even in this most recent Joe Rogan episode, hearing Joe say, well, everybody, because people thought he did. Okay, at a certain point, it doesn't matter whether the person who has the gun on your head is planning on shooting you in the head or not. Even if they intended to do it or not. Even if it's somebody, or even if it's a fake, you may not even know. Maybe it's a toy gun. You don't know. But in that moment, the gun is on your head. So you don't spend the time reasoning out the most ethical way to remedy this particular situation. And I hate, the best way I can put this right now is that that's where we are. We're no longer a year or a year and a half ago. We've had many indicators that there are enough people that do not have what we value at heart. And that, in fact, history has proven that this does happen. So, for example, we don't talk about Stalinism very much, or even Maoism. We only talk about Hitler, but how much do people know about the purges, the Cultural Revolution, or the Great Leap Forward? We don't talk about it very much now. And that really frightens me a lot. Because if you really look at what was being said in that Joe Rogan episode, and what so many people are saying now, and what you can look at just 2 different states in our country you know, New York, as much as it can feel like they're absolutely aliens lately, I really saw what was going on there. I I guarantee you that you would feel the same kind of remorse and anger that you felt on 9/11. Because when I say this, I mean this without any exaggeration. What happened 20 years ago, we just felt. We weren't able to hold it back any longer. So when people say, you get what you vote for, you get what you asked for, I'm going to concede that a little bit and leave that thought aside. But even if it's true, even if it's true that you get what you asked for, so we went up to that roof and he opened the door and I chose to date that moron. But does that matter when the gun is on your head? What are we even talking about? You know, the very same kind of criticisms that, you know, we give a lot of the COVIDians out there and the people who seem to just blindly go along with this, or people who seem, as someone on Twitter put today, you know, to be educated past their capacity. As well, that's how my mother always puts it. None of that matters when the gun is on your head. And there's a gun on our heads. And that's if we're lucky. Totalitarian creep isn't here in Florida. Mostly not. I see little glimpses of it, not in anything that is... I see it in the lack of awareness of what's going on. The fact that there are people that truly have no clue. One could argue we get what we pay for there, too. I mean, everybody who's watched CNN, Fox, Times, Post, every single person that works there who has failed completely to share with the world what's really happening in New York, why it happened. To talk about the attack that occurred in June during the BLM riots, because that was an attack. That's what it was. And it's what broke us. We didn't choose that. I would say until Eric Adams was elected, that I can't say that wasn't chosen, and that's one of the reasons I'm leaving. Because what starts to happen over time, and this could happen anywhere in this country or the world, is as that creeps in further and further, the place loses all of what made it vibrant. And I say this because has anybody ever thought about why it was that... Well, see, I used to go back and forth to Romania under the Soviets, and I realized that a lot of people didn't... Maybe they saw it right after at the end, or Cuba. So, I'll tell you a little what it was before. And then what it became. I'm going to talk a little bit about Romania specifically. And I think that, and I hope that we can learn from them. I'm going to make a little joke here as a Hungarian to say that. It's pretty amazing. I'm kidding. I'm really kidding. So I want to talk about Romania. Romania used to be, well, Bucharest used to be known or called the little Paris of Eastern Europe. Now, Bucharest itself is that I recently had an argument. No, it was it. I don't think it was ever quite as beautiful as, say, Budapest or Prague. But the Romanian people had something very special that also made them really vulnerable to the Soviets and to post-Yalta society. Which, remember, Yalta came about because of us, the UK, and Stalin all signing a treaty together after defeating Hitler. So basically, for some reason, we defeated one guy and then handed over the spoils to another who proceeded to murder about 300 to 400 million people. So, if we want to talk numbers, that's about just under 100 times more. These include Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, dissidents, every single thing, as it was. And Romania was a very unique situation because, you know, my family had fled Hungary in 1944 when things were coming to an end with the war. However, a party called, I forget the name of it, and they were colloquially known as basically zealotous religious sect of true fascist thuggy, like, think woke in power with violence added in, and very, very religious, though, and in this case, Christian. And their anti Semitism stems from that. Specifically, they hate Jews. And they decide, when they get power, to help Hitler do the job toward the final solution, which, imagine that you are, and there's a reason I'm talking about this before going back to Romania. Imagine that you are living somewhere and you are fully integrated into that society, that one day you have lunch at school with your neighbor who's Christian and you happen to be Jewish. And then, and imagine that you have the largest synagogue in all of Europe there. So you feel secure and you feel safe. And most of all, you're Hungarian. Before your ethnicity, and I feel this way about myself. My your ethnicity is your country. Your religion is Judaism. So you are an American who is Jewish. And then the next day, out of nowhere, no warning, really none, it was that fast. Other than the given, months earlier. You have an hour to pack up. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what to pack. And these Greeks seen do things like squeeze somebody's face. And you are lucky that you're not part of the group that the first group of Jews, they took them down to the Danube, lined them up, shot them in the head, fell right into the water. There's actually a memorial there, which are just empty shoes people left, which I have to say, every time I see the images of shoes, you know, shoes of, nurses that have abandoned their shoes and teachers, and all I think about is that. If you Google, I can share it with you if you guys want. Let's see if I can find it and share my screen. You know what? Google it. I don't want to mess up what I think is working. if you Google Bucharest, which is spelled Bucharest, and Danube, Danube, and shoes, you'll see this memorial to all those people who were shot, and their bodies thrown into the Danube. It said, like, so you, but you are the only home you've known. And suddenly, could it should have been sooner. Friends suddenly turned, and I'm mentioning this too because the way that my friends turned on me after the vaccine came out. I mean, I was called a parasite. One day, I had a friend named Tracy who I admired and really thought was fabulous. In fact, I liked her so much, I respected her so much that I, to this day, still have something she wrote during the Me Too movement that I thought was extraordinary. Changing what should be the focus, and still have it in my phone. Next thing I know, there is no such thing as somebody who's not getting the vaccine who isn't a parasite. Period. Tried to talk to her. Nope. It scares the shit out of me. Because a slur is a slur and contempt is contempt, and I know that there are people in New York who want people like me dead. I know it. So, really, what's the difference? Bigotry is bigotry. Whether it's somebody like me who can't get the vaccine, or it's somebody who's just being different, who refuses. I mean, how is that any different? And the libel being made against people who aren't vaccinated, and the lies about them, and the spreading of disease, and all these assumptions. How are we not? Like, I think it was Michael Malice who said, replace unvaccinated with Jew. Jews, there are Jews. We are asking you to do that. There are many of us asking you to do that. Sure, there's some that are claiming anti-Semitic. I disown that. Frankly, I disown them. Judaism is my religion. It doesn't have to be my tribe. And I don't know how to relate to that. And I don't know how to relate to a God who would agree with that. Or to people who are not even thinking about their relationship to God, but see themselves only as an ethnicity, because my ethnicity is not Jewish. My ethnicity is Magyar and American. I once would have maybe said New Yorker. So, suddenly my city, just like for these people, became somewhere that I was hated. Now, what happened next in Bucharest obviously is not what's going on, but there's little indicators that, people don't really learn, I think, about how the machine of the final solution came about. Like, what nobody likes to talk about the basic steps of things, the banality of evil, as Hannah Arendt says. Nobody likes to talk about the nuts and bolts of these things. Some people, I think it's, what does it matter when somebody you love is dead? Well, you know what? It does matter, because those of us who are alive need to understand these things, because that's how we make sure these things don't happen again. So, we're in 1944, but if you rewind prior to a moment when the head of the part of the SS that was in charge of rounding up and killing Jews, who, and that section was run by somebody named, Hess. There was a moment when things changed. Prior to that moment, Jews were basically just being like they were in Hungary, marched out of their homes and shot in ditches or the Danube. So what changed? Well, I think a lot about this story lately. And in fact, it's touched on in one of my Covidian satires, the one that's the second to the last one, not the one where she goes a little cuckoo and afraid of the trans-inoculites, but the one that begins with, welcome, friends and family, and you have earned your place in the halls of the right side of history. That one. That one actually was, there's a segment of it that is inspired specifically by this moment in history and what happened, which is the moment when the final solution, technically, and it's the way it was achieved, changed. So the people who were shooting Jews and rounding them up and taking them out of the towns, they were given some privileges and allowances that other SS officers weren't given. So, for example, they could have alcohol. If they decided to quit and leave, they could do so without any repercussions. And what's kind of interesting about that is they were treated a lot better than Stalin treated his soldiers, and that's the truth. So, guess when it comes to if we're who's worse, I guess that's Nazis won, Stalin, sorry, Stalin won, Nazis, you know, zero if we're just at that point. But there's a reason I say that. So Hess, who was in charge of overall in charge of these guys, started to hear that there was problems going on, that their alcoholism had increased, that people were getting each other in terms of within the car. So he went to see what's going on, and their group of Jews are rounded out of their village, you know, out and past enough people who are in the back don't see what happens to the people in the front or hear it. Shoots a mother and a baby in the head, and Hess immediately vomits and takes his leave. I imagine that he, composed himself and then, realized he had something he had to say. And what do you say? What do you say when you're showing such a reaction to, to the death of something that, you've made it very clear isn't even human? So what do you say to that? How do you explain that? Well, what he did, so in that speech he gave, he basically said that you shouldn't worry if when you feel terrible or terror or sadness or grief when you're killing a Jew, because that's what separates you from them. That's what makes you better than them, because you feel these things. I've heard almost identical comments made by people who use terms like anti-vaxxer. When I wrote that satire, when I say, do not fret for any sadness that their suffering brings you, that this is just what separates you from them made manifest. And we are now safe from them. So I ask, the language, the constant attempt to delineate us as essential, inessential, smart because they're vaccinated and anti-vaxxer, expert, misinformation. Um, when I'm here, sorry, that Joe Rogan thing really got to me because he said a lot of things that I have felt for 2 years now. And I think that if we don't start to deal with this, like this is, as he put it, it's a war between decentralization and centralization, or I like to better, it's a war between going and going. And this change that I'm going to have to go through between being here and being free and seeing smiley face, just being human, and it being rational and sane and actually scientific, and the beauty of a place where not everything is political. To then go to New York, where the political has suffocated it to the point where New Yorkers, I guess, have had oxygen deprivation and have become completely insane. Or perhaps permanently stupid. I don't know which. I'm making kind of a joke, but I'm really not. But let me just say that if it could happen there, it could happen anywhere, including where I am now. Um, and it happened, if I go circle back to what I was trying to get at about Romania, is, when totalitarian creep gets into a society, a culture. I was born in 78, so we were not, in terms of where they come from or even their immutable characteristics. But, sometimes you have to, and you have to understand it's in Europe. And in Romania, they were a very Christian in all of that part of Europe, if not all of Europe, actually, at that point. The Hungarians, were fighting off the Ottomans and the Turks, and, they're kind of like the Klingons, I'm not even kidding. Seretlik, that's how you say I love you in Hungarian. Um, it's actually, I have heard that the language of Klingon was based on Hungarian, so. Um, but the Romanians, it's a Francophile language. Hungarian, you say Seretlik. Romania, Eu te iubesc. Um, and your language, influences how you think and the kind of people you are. And, Eugene Ionescu, the playwright, Brancusi, the sculptor, um, incredible filmmakers, all of that, they all came from that part of the world. And they had a great deal of patriotism, love of their nation and their country, pride. There were people that, at one point it was considered, that was the end of the world. That was where, the Romans stopped, didn't go further. That's how Romania got its name. There used to be Dacian. And they had a royal family. And I think it was King Carol. Could have been King Paul. I can't remember right now. It might have been, I think it was King Carol. He picked up a gun and said he would not allow Hitler and his, think about that. That was why my family fled to Romania. Because there you could pay off the Nazis. You could do whatever it took to survive. They didn't get a fascist dictatorship that, like, the green shirts in Hungary got. They were a proud people, um, religious people, which made them the perfect target for the goals of what Stalin brought with the terror of Bolshevism. You destroy nation, family, and God. That's what you do. Because those are the biggest threats to anything that's a radical collective. Or rather, to radical collectivists. And they don't have a left, right, up, down. Sort. They're so fucking insane that they may as well be spinning. Calling it left or right is to me, asinine. Okay? You can be on the left and not be one of, like, this kooky group of people who don't, like, I mean, I wrote this on a tweet that they don't believe in an individual the same way some people don't believe in unicorns, or I mean, most people, I think, although I wish they were real, but to them it's not real. Any consciousness isn't real. There's no distinction between you and me, and they set out to prove that. Under the guise of, the, whatever. But ultimately, what it just meant is, in my humble, or not too humble opinion, is it's just another form of human sacrifice. You sacrifice humans for, the sun god, or you sacrificed in Peru. Who knows why they sacrificed 500 children and baby llamas? It doesn't freaking matter. At the end of the day, if you believe that you have to sacrifice people in order to appease or do something for the greater good, you kind of missed what makes being human so remarkable. Our innovation, our ingenuity, and our memory, and our compassion, and our belief in something that is beyond us. Even elephants do that, right? Dolphins, some birds, and humans. And yet these people claim, even though they'll probably talk about, save the elephant, they will claim that there's no such thing as an individual. Yet an elephant will tell you there is. A dolphin, a whale, a great ape. So, sorry to say it this way, these people are not just dangerous, they're fucking dumb. They're stupid. Willfully stupid. Mere part. Or miseducated is a part of it. And that's, in large part, we have to take responsibility for that. Anybody, that's why I keep trying to talk about these things, because when people aren't taught things, that whatever is offered is going to fill that vacuum. And that's bad enough under the best circumstances. But now in a world where we have misinformation and other words that are trying to revise and recreate reality in the way that they see it, which will include the idea that individuals don't matter. This was something that was perfected in Romania. So, the night that... So my mother and her brother and her father had all fled there, and the way they had fled, and I'm just going to speak about this candidly, I'm usually I get a little embarrassed about this for some reason, and I don't really know how to talk about it, but my grandfather, and they were nobility, they were baron, they were hussars, they were ennobled by Franz Josef under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and yes, they were Jewish. Um, they were... There was such a thing as the word noble. It did mean something for some people, and he was. It's like now in some John or something like that. But in this case, it was because he and raised Lipizzaner horses, which were the descendants of war horses, basically. Um, and he was they were very, very. My grandfather's side of the family was very, very well off. My grandmother's side of the family, they were three generations of lawyers. All the women were, and yeah, that was a reality too in some places. So those glass ceilings are a little more complicated than people make them out to be. Um, so they took their to get to Romania. Now, real definition of privilege there. They were privileged to be able to survive and get out of Hungary because 400,000 Jews in Hungary were killed in 2 weeks at the end of the war. That's a lot. And some even faster than that. The accounts are that from the time that they left and were told that they were going to be working in these wine fields, you know, or the vineyards, and they put them in, getting them to Auschwitz was just a couple of days. But then once you got to Auschwitz, the time between somebody, if they were slotted for, you know, destruction, from the line splitting to the moment that you are dead was about 30 minutes. Not even. That's how good at it they had gotten. And remember that moment with Hess when he recognized and, threw up and felt some empathy for his fellow soldiers? Well, they put their noodling together because they needed to find a way to kill many people and make it so that it wasn't so up close and personal. That's the truth. I mean, there was so I think what had happened was one group of Jews in the back of a truck accidentally died from, fumes from a tailpipe, and they go, aha! Banality of evil, all right. So my family escaped that. So I actually have one great aunt that was on the train car with this who wrote Night Elie Wiesel, and she got out of Auschwitz. She was a children's book illustrator. I didn't have I on my mother's side. I'm usual only to Hitler. In preparation, once they got to Romania, they were going to go to, because there was no Israel yet. The region was called Palestine, which is always, because I get a kick out of that because one might say Jordanians are appropriating the name, but that's neither here nor there. But they weren't allowed to take jewelry out, as I understand it. And so they hired a carpenter to build a fake wall in this wagon that would have been like the horse and carriage wagon. And all of their belongings were already on a ship that was going to leave in the morning to Palestine. And the carpenter who had built the fake wall for he had a child that was very disabled. And I think that's the reason my mother always likes to give turned my family in, and why it was okay to see was taken him and his wife weren't my jewelry while they had the ability to get food. Or checking village. So they told Securitate, and they came in the middle of the night and took my grandfather and put him in the gulag. And the gulag that they put him in was called the place. This was the only one I ever knew about until a few months ago, called the Black Valley. And it was where they were building a canal in the Danube, and it was a place where the people who were problematic were sent. Supposedly, my grandfather was trying to organize people there to fight back and push back against this craziness. Just like he'd actually protested against World War I at Madison Square Garden in New York. He dressed as a shoe cleaner and said that if we go to war, we will forever be cleaning their shoes. He was very against World War I. So I guess I come by the like theatrics, honestly. But I learned a few months ago something I know, and I learned it after listening to a podcast by Mortar Maid. It's a phenomenal podcast, probably the only real what happened to Dr. Yalta, and it's called The Anti-Humans. Warn you, it's one of the hardest things, but I think it's important. But prepare yourself because it's in many ways it's like first hearing ever about the Holocaust and some of its atrocities. It's like that. In some ways, I will say this even worse. But there was a very special prison camp, Gulag in Romania, that was called Prištiš prison, and there, the inmates were not put there to work. They were part of an and this they set out to prove that a human being is not anything but just a bunch of reactive stuff. It's all nurture. There's no difference. There's that whole individual right thing, and the law can prove nothing divine about the human being through this experiment. Romania, which never had any communism, the Communist Party were proud and patriotic people. If you can do it to them, buddy, there's your proof. So they set out to prove this experiment. And the way they did that was through torture, but a very specific torture. Extermination. Mates became the torturers. That was the torture. Um, and I don't even want to try to explain what happened there, but I'll just say that I, after hearing about all of it, and he had mentioned the word Black Valley in the podcast, and I'd never heard anyone but my mother say Black Valley. So it's like, I guess the analogy would be like never hearing anyone say Auschwitz and suddenly hear the word Auschwitz for the first time, somebody else. So I told my mom, and then I mentioned Prestige to her, and she said to me, my dad was there, and that, you know, he was let go from there, and then he was sent back to Black Valley, and that's where they let him out for 2 weeks after Stalin died, and then I think it was after Stalin died, and then they put him back in, and I assume that was when they transitioned him from Prestige to back to Black Valley, where he died after a decade. And I mention this because several months ago I was hosting a space, and a woman with a Eastern European accent came in, and it was after I heard this story from Murder Maid and learned about my grandpa there, and she says, as we're talking about the mandates and the masking and the totalitarian creep and all the stuff I've talked about a lot before, even, live not by lies, all that stuff. She says, we are living in the results of the Prestige prison experiment. And it chilled me to my bones. And at the time I was in New York, I'd never seen, let alone, I don't think I even knew, other than Russia, what St. Petersburg was. And every part of me knew this was true. I mean, and it wasn't for the longest time the cops or, anybody enforcement that was making sure that, or even to this day, museum. It's the inmates become the torturers. And I guess I kind of been thinking a little bit about like how far does that go out, right? So you've got it in that micro level. You've got the in the prison, and then it expands. Like when people say that, and that they're not American anymore, or we're not American anymore, or people in the press flat out lying and enforcing lies and what we call lashon hara, which means ill speech, which is also divisive speech that destroys relationships and connections. The inmates become the torturers, right? But I'll say that also in this small way. Desire to go back to New York, and I'm really scared. Part of me, I think, is doing this because I start turning on the temperature a little bit, rather than just get dropped in there. In this place that looks so much like Bucharest to me now, like gray and drab, and there's vibrancy, the energies. What happens under Zionism? Creativity is the first to go. It dies. At least out. And it was the moment that I had an idea of create, and I couldn't do it in New York because I couldn't have masked. I just realized there was no. I literally also couldn't do it. Vaccinated, I couldn't. There would be so many obstacles that whatever I wasn't as a director, I wouldn't be responsible because my job is to make sure everybody else looks great. And I vanish, and I can't do that if I can before I vanish, or even before I get into the space, which is what it feels. People forgot you even exist. Artists are continuing on with their lives, and they don't see us. And the inmates become the torturers. But here, and I'm sure there's some other places like that where there's I don't know what it is about this place specifically, and I hope I learn, but there's an authentic vibrancy. And I spent last night, Monday night, at this place called Ruby Elixirs, which turns out every Monday the same band opens up, and I tweeted their stuff, and good. There's so many good musicians, and I forgot denied. I'm gonna take a pause, and I'm gonna get a glass, and I'm gonna pour myself some wine. Um, and I'm gonna focus on two things. One is a simple request, which is that I am really scared to go back to New York, and I'm gonna be there for a month. I already have my place to stay here for I rented on an Airbnb, but I've never asked quite like this. I'll react like I keep getting surprised. Please help me deal with it, because I don't want it to mess me up for good. And I'll tell us that, but I'll talk about what I think we gain and what I've seen here if we just stop this shit. Like, why it's worth it. and what I plan to do on trying to help it. And look, there's people who say this much. If you think that Bitcoin's going to save the day, why didn't it so far? It's going to take creativity to figure out how to make that ledger work before people conflate it with crypto, and then suddenly cryptocurrency is cryptocurrency, and we're all watching people beat down a for crypto coded like a token, and we're all living under social credit system, a la, China. And this episode of Black Mirror will really, like, just ridiculously bad, but all fucking annoying because the way these things end are, it's not governments, it's not even just lawyers, it's not just the rational, it's arts and poetry and history, and it's all the liberal stuff, truly liberal stuff, that once you reach a point of no return, that defeats it. And if you don't believe me, look at what's going on in Ottawa. What are the people doing there? When they finally got together, they're dancing, they're coming up with ways to be innovative and creative, and that's what's keeping them going. And that's the way these things work. So I'm gonna grab a glass, and when I come back, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my day yesterday, my night yesterday. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Pee break. Like music. Okay. Oops. Don't break somebody's glass, woman. Okay, so let me check in over here and see if there's anything I need to look at on Twitter. Make sure that I'm still. Oh, that's interesting. Tweets aren't loading right now. I don't know why that is. But, if that means that I've just been talking to myself now, it's okay. I can live with that. So, last night there was. I don't even know what to call it, a live band of four black men. Really amazing. Like, I tweeted some of it out. Just fucking talented. Seen that kind of dance floor since, those people who might have known since maybe vinyl or similar. And I'll tell you something, I was really happy to once again felt naturally diverse because New York used to be. It ain't now. When you segregate, what is it, like 80% of your equity. So the band was, I mean, they did a like a open mic thing, which is really, I mean, I think it was pretty tough to follow them, but it's every looking forward to coming back to that. And I found myself chatting with an artist who, if I get a chance, I'll show you. I bought a T-shirt. It says, "Rebel Heart" is his. Like, this is one of his signs. Peace sign. I can't remember the heart, and even he and I and this woman were all chatting about you. The world that we're being told from academics, I suppose, or I don't even freaking know anymore because it's not reality. Been had. We were all in agreement that everything that's going on is insidious. Change numbers. How I can. I don't know how else to. People who. This is. I realize now that it's even hard. I've lost in New York when I see it here, and it's so. Somebody said to me that they think that one of the things that the people that those in those powers that be want to do, that's how to control them. And I'd like to say, I believe that there are people that are just trying to pod everyone, but the performance, and this is the key, is and why the dancing nurses were so creepy is the flips. In that scene in Matrix when they all get to Zion, they just have this exuberant dance. Is it? Things are communicated that no to they know that they cannot defeat that. That's why Ottawa is such, the reason the truckers are such a threat. The real reason is that it's bringing Ottawa, it's bringing Canadians together. They still be enforcing, half of the lockdown stuff in these places. You think that there's nobody that has a motive? Let me put it like this: you don't need to build a gulag when everybody's just has the walls around them themselves, and it's just suddenly that's their own homes are the gulag. For people who had no problem with the lockdowns, I'm glad for you that you didn't have a price. Just like those people who don't mind masks, I'm glad you're not suffering, but you are wrong that they don't have a price. And it's a price that you are going to end up paying eventually. And it could just simply be in the fact that, the people that the delight they get in being around other people, the energy they get from that. Those are the people who become people like Steve. Innovate, and I'm not saying that you can't do stuff like that without people who could be other people, but we are social creatures. I think it was, and Jordan Peterson talked about this once. He explained that people are creative. It's time, and also those people can be paying because when it's a high reward, not having that change the world and save the world and make the world. Imagine a world without Da Vinci, Shakespeare, Bowie, Buckler, anybody who was really, really, I guess it's, like I said, I tweet about it, it's pretty useless. Planet, like it's the thing that is so human about us. And and I'm so glad that to have a place to go. And it's going to be a big. I might be even asking for some help, but what's been lost in so many places, like I just saw footage in Paris. They arrested they arrested a performer who gave an outdoor concert and refused to use mandates in Paris. This is to, and I'm just going to say this directly to people who are artistically minded or supporters of the arts. Hurry up. We have to hurry. I don't know what the answer is. It's going to be hard. It's going to come. No one will remember. That's sort of the way. More was kind of about this little secret. Well, how they're like, we better hurry the fuck up. And don't, that thing that you were born with, that who the hell knows why, the thing that Bukowski says, if you don't wake up every day, like, and need to do it, don't do it, that thing. I mean, sure, there might be other things that matter more, like your child. But I'll tell you, anybody who went to, even if there was an underground scene in East Berlin, as someone might say, I don't think any artist worth their salt is going to think that it's okay to have that thriving underground scene at the expense of the people who to grow and be inspired by and be so we need beauty because it makes us yearn to be worthy of it. I'm getting emotional, so I'm just going to close this out because it is getting late and I have a couple days left here, but so much time around things that are beautiful. Got to go out on a boat. I immediately started to cry when it got going. I grew up on the water, so that free feeling of just, that's another thing, nature, right? Just in small ways, maybe do for somebody else what was done for me. The reason I'm here is because my friend Steven Schwager, who I didn't know in person until I came here, should come here for a couple weeks, and we'd only known each other from Twitter, Team Reality, and he pushed. He wouldn't let it go. He knew that I needed to get out of there. And I probably would never have done it. And also, in part, that I'm afraid of going back, because having to go back after, being in an abusive relationship, sometimes it feels easier to just take it. But what Steven Schwager and his wife Becky, and what so many people have done for me, I'm honored that I get to be an individual that's worthy of that. And it just makes me even sadder to realize that there are you know this whole snowflake. No, we're not special. We're human beings. We have specializations, and we've got mysterious that nobody could quite understand. And fighting for that, for that quality of liberalism, and it is liberal. Like, so I plead with people to stop, saying that what's going on is liberal. It's not. It's the opposite. It's illiberal. We need liberalism to defeat this, because it's the stuff that's not practical and absurd that breaks. You break mass formation not through rationality and reason. You break it by taking a walk and holding someone's hand. You don't need to know what somebody's politics is to remember that politics. And that's something that anyone who's lived under or seen communism will tell you. The privilege and the luxury of not having everything. Not everything is political, because think about it. If everything is political, nothing is political. Doesn't make any sense. These people are not very smart. Except when they are. So, what am I talking about anymore? I think I'll close it. I'm going to be going to possibly a poetry reading tomorrow, an open mic night, it was every last Wednesday of the month here in St. Petersburg. They hold it, and when I went to the first one, or the only one I've been to, I was, procrastinating, because I was convinced it was going to be like the way they are in New York, which is basically a bunch of people angry and upset and sad. At the time, everybody obsessively talking about how terrible Trump is, and it's boring, and it's art shackled to politics. And I mean, I'm sorry, but anyone who tells you that all art is political, they're being political. It's bullshit. It's not. It's not binary like that. But I was unbelievably surprised. It's a place called keep the Berg lit is a movement here, and for St. Petersburg, keep the Berg lit, and and it just occurred to me, there's a mythos amongst theater people that we leave the ghost light on. It's a light we always leave on the stage. So I kind of like that. Keep the Berg light, like, keep the ghost light on, and in the Atlantic, they say that masks don't. Well, neither does be warned. That game. Let's play that game. Doesn't make sense. You take them off doesn't need to make sense. It could be as simple as nothing. Not everything needs. But I would dare say that when you're abusing people, you should have a fucking good reason to do it, or you're just an abusive shit. And whether, like, going back to the beginning of all this, whether your intentions are whatever, like whether you're meaning to be, you're still people according to parties. And so if I go back reading, I read and I was moved by how people are really, including there were some New Yorkers that were in the room, and I'm just gonna close it. And bakers of oops, nicest I'm just trying to find the text out. And this is something that I wrote. Oh no, no, no. Yeah, see, I'm losing my ability to multitask here. It's between the wine and emotions, and also I'm convinced that my left brain has just been like tied up and put in a gag or something, so that I don't just become totally. I mean, I'm a little bonkers, but I would be much more bonkers if I tried to be the master. Um, um, Ian Gilchrist actually says living in a time that is the left brain is basically like trying to. He said, I think he said he was trying to. The left brain is trying to burn down the world. Let's see if I. Bum, bum, bum. Got it. So here goes nothing. So this is the one that I read last time, and I would read it again. And it's something that I wrote for during this time, last 2 years. To me, more than 2 years. When last derailment, the it's that date is very simple. There was it came out with MIT Tech on that date, and it's called "We're Not Going Back to." See that? It was published March 17th and 20. See that? And it's kind of weird. Like, how would they know that? And it talks about radically needing to change. This whole thing. Discussed in Joe Rogan. I mean, they were talking about the new normal that quickly. That there's something fishy going on. Forward. Come on. But I read this section I've never read, I've never been more scared in that moment. I knew something was coming. We don't know exactly what it looks like, of course, but in which to get on a flight, perhaps you'll have to a service that tracks your movements via your phone. It would get an alert if you'd been infected people or disease hotspots. There'd be similar requirements at the entrance to large venues, government buildings, or hubs. There would be temperature scanners everywhere, and they might demand you wear a monitor that tracks your temperature or other vital signs. Proof of age. In the future, they might ask for proof of immunity. March 17th, 2020. An identification card or some kind of digital already recovered from, at least there. You did natural immunity. Go figure. It wasn't a misinformation yet. Showing you've already recovered from against the latest virus strains. Sense. We to and accept such measures, such as increasingly stringent airport security screenings in the wake of terrorist attacks. The intrusive surveillance will be considered a small for the basic freedom to be with other people. There's no such thing as a small period. If we were animals, at images of our once vibrant pop stars would sing sad. The image of glassy, longing, memory-filled eyes across our touch-starved bodies, promising a chance to care. And a few dollars a month away. Us as stick figures sat on watching puppets pull empathy out of their bellies like pumpkin pulp, then pinning us proudly to refrigerators, parents gazing down with mouths proud as jack-o'-lanterns. Conservationists would spring into action. NGOs and nonprofits, foundations and charities set into motion like ready to protect the endangered species from the cruelty of men. If we were animals, callus-covered feet and dry hands would work in perfect harmony to move out and out beyond planet. All the manufactured and soul-lost half-faces, then think nothing more of it. Instinct. Any highway away from the thing that had encroached on my habitat, unknowing energy with infinite power pulling us back to together. They would them themselves and other each other to save us. From stone hearts, a price paid, they'd say, for their unnatural. If we were animals, into villains on giant screens, pour music over the paint. What their own had done, crossing their hands, signing checks with oaths. Urchins. If we were animals, with legislation. If we were animals, NPR would strike empathy on bare knuckles, gripping steer. If we were animals, they would say, this is no animal. And I'm not sure exactly how it works yet, but I've made a I got access to this thing, Twitter communities. I made a, and if you want to be invited to it, you can always leave if it's not for you. But let's be dangerous and also offer some kinship and kindred, stuff. To quote Harrison Bridgeron, that was a doozy. It's gonna be a doozy. Um, but there's also good stuff. So anyway, I hope this worked. I'll get better at it. And I know I said I would do an AMA. If folks want me to, I'll just pop open a YouTube live stream and do that for like 20 minutes, but just tell me on Twitter you want that. And I'm just going to end this and say, to so many of you, Scott, Paul, Antigone, and so many more people. They should try swimming in our waters for a little while. And go slide on. Good night, everybody.